afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. It is 6 o'clock, so we are ready to get started. I can confirm we do indeed have quorum. Currently absent from the meeting is Councillor Holland. Joining us from staff are Sean Armstrong, the Fire Chief, Luke Fowell, Director, Engineering Services, Peter Hugenboss, the Commissioner, Business, Real Estate and Environment, Blair Johnson, the Corporate Records and Information Officer, is our meeting host tonight. Brad Joyce, Commissioner, Transportation and Public Works, Lucretia Turner, Director, Recreation and Leisure Services, Neil Unsworth, Manager, Parks and Shoreline, and I am Ian Sullivan, the committee clerk. There are currently 5 members of the public in the viewing gallery. And with all that out of the way, happy to turn it over to you, Mr. Chair.
You're on mute, Councillor.
Sorry about that. I tried to do 2 things at once. That doesn't often work. So I've called the meeting to order. I'm looking for approval of the agenda. The Councillor McLaren is moving. Oh, clerk, Mr. Sullivan.
Also with the addeds, please, Mr. Chair.
Oh, okay. Approve of the agenda with the addits, which I believe there are 3 addendums. Councillor McLaren moves that. I can't see everybody, so I'm not sure who's seconding. Can the clerk see somebody?
I see Councillor Osanek.
Okay, good. All those in favor of the agenda with the edits, please vote. And for some reason, much better. Okay, so the next item is confirmation of the minutes of Thursday, April 28th, 2022. Does anyone wish to have any subtractions or deletions or added? Or no? So moved by Councillor Neal, I believe, and seconded by Councillor Osanek. And all those in favor of the minutes, that passes. Disclosure of pecuniary interest. Does anyone have a pecuniary interest? Not surprisingly, there aren't any. And 5, do we have any delegations?
We have no delegations this evening.
Okay, thank you. So briefings, I don't believe we have any of those either. We'll probably get the equivalent from staff at any rate. Okay, so we're at item 7A. The first item is Parks and Recreation Master Plan information on indoor, outdoor, multi-sports court and costs for future planning of aquatic facilities. Staff, it's common that you have you want to introduce this, Mr. Falwell. Please proceed.
Thank you, and good evening. I will provide introductory remarks on the sport court content within the report, and pass it over to my colleague Lucretia Turner to provide some commentary on the aquatic facilities. So starting with the sport court conversation and content, the implementation plan outlined in the committee report recommends an increase in service level for both dedicated outdoor tennis and pickleball courts. The plan includes the equivalent increase of 2 tennis courts and 15 pickleball courts over the planning period. The service level of dedicated pickleball courts is increasing from approximately 1 court per 8,300 residents to 1 court per 5,100 residents, which represents approximately 35% increase in service level. That service level further increases when we take into consideration the lighted courts. The additional cost for the amendments to the tennis and pickleball implementation plan is estimated at approximately $1.7 million and would be incorporated into the 15-year capital forecast for consideration. Recommended changes in the Kingston West include Cataract Way Community Park in the Woodhaven subdivision to see 2 tennis courts and 6 dedicated pickleball courts with future lights. The construction of this project is expected to occur in 2023 and 2024, with public engagement occurring over the next few months. Further recommendation to shift the newly constructed pickleball courts in Cat West will reduce potential conflict of noise in Bay Ridge Park and allow for 2 additional pickleball courts in Cataraqui West Park. This would also allow for 4 tennis courts to be accommodated in Bay Ridge Park and 4 renovated tennis courts in Henderson Park, which would be an increase in 1 tennis court in terms of the Park and Rec Master Plan that's currently approved. Recommend changes in Kingston Central include at Bell Park, 2 tennis courts and 12 dedicated pickleball courts in the short term. Construction is expected to occur in 2024. The balance of phase 1 of Bell Park works would be pushed back 1 year to start in 2025. Those amenities would be pathways, playgrounds, and dog parks as part of the currently deferred project. There would be in Shannon Park, 1 tennis court and 4 pickleball courts, and William Hackett Park would see 2 tennis courts with room for 2 additional courts and other amenities. Recommended changes in Kingston East include 2 tennis courts and 4 dedicated pickleball courts in Grenadier Park, with the ability to light those courts in the future. On the multi-court front, we're recommending the removal of Henderson Park multi-purpose pickleball lines. Also recommending to reduce 2 of 4 pickleball lines at Riverview Park and add new lines to Polson Park and Compton Park. Lights are recommended at Compton Park in the short term, Cataraqui West Community Park and Grenadier Park in the midterm, and Bell Park in the long term. A tennis wall is proposed to be in the short term located in Compton Park, and with future opportunities be provided in both Kingston West and East for further tennis walls. And now I'd like to introduce Lucretia Turner, Director of Rec and Leisure Services, provide an introductory remarks on the aquatic facilities component to the report.
Okay, thanks, Luke. I'm actually going to handle this one, but it's all good. Peter Humas, Commissioner for the group, and I'll just keep it brief. I know we have a big agenda. We'll keep it going, but there are 2 other motions from this committee back in April of 2022 or 2021. The second was the asking staff to look at indoor courts, what other municipalities do and how they partner on those. Councillors may recall that Council approved a purchase of service agreement with Tennis Clubs Canada, which has recently purchased land in the city's business park in Kingston East and St. Lawrence Business Park. That secured 12 pickleball courts and a number of tennis courts through a purchase of service agreement with the city. So staff understand that has addressed that motion from this committee through Council's approval of that agreement. The other third and last motion from April 2021 was on the cost to begin the planning process for an aquatics facility in the west end at the Invista Center and in an undetermined location in the East Kingston. So staff have put together numbers to plan for those facilities on the timeline as per the motion. The west is in a timeline of 6 to 10 years, and the east was a timeline of 11 to 15 years. As you'll see in the report, the planning process would need to begin by 2025 in order to have a pool built for 2029, if that was Council's desire. The estimated cost in 2022 dollars is $55.5 million for the west and about $57 million for a similar aquatic facility in the east, plus time and cost to find a site. Anyway, there's more details in the report and happy to answer questions at a later time from this committee, but just wanted to give the high level notes and happy to move on. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. No other comments from staff, I don't believe. Councillor McLaren, going to the committee first, Councillor McLaren.
Thank you. So I got a concern from one of the residents who believes that we're taking away from Henderson and Bay Ridge pickleball courts. Can I ask, is that true? And exactly how many are being lost compared to, say, before the pandemic, and how many will be there at the end of all this?
Thank you, and through you. So yes, staff are recommending the removal of the multi-purpose lines that are currently on the Henderson courts. We receive on a regular basis complaints from surrounding neighbors and from our partner to the east at the Lakeshore Pool in terms of challenges with the activity that takes place there. So we are recommending full removal of those multi-purpose lines that are on that court. Staff are currently working with a contractor to build some new courts at Bay Ridge Park, where we have 3 tennis courts. We're constructing 3 tennis courts and 4 new dedicated pickleball courts. And it would be the recommendation is to, once Cataraqui West Community Park is developed with 6 pickleball courts, that the 4 dedicated pickleball courts convert back to tennis at Bay Ridge Park.
So in total, as soon as this is all done, are we up or down?
We are up in terms of dedicated pickleball courts across west, central, and east.
Okay, so over the whole city. Okay, I
Yeah.
can respond with that. Thank you.
Councillor Stanek, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, just a few questions, right? So one concern of that has been in the email a lot over the last 2 days is that when the pickleball courts move from Bay Ridge Park over to Cat West Community Park, and then those 4 dedicated pickleball courts at Bay Ridge get converted to a tennis court. Some people were asking how much that will cost. And I just wondered, yeah, how much will it cost? Is it relatively inexpensive?
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. The design for the Bay Ridge pickleball courts, where the base design was such to accommodate 4 tennis courts. So the footprint is there to accommodate a new tennis court. The infrastructure is there to accommodate the tennis netting. So it would involve removing the structures for the pickleball courts and covering the pickleball lines and adding new tennis lines, because the court surface itself will be new. And it's staff estimation that that would be in the $20,000 to $30,000 range.
Okay, thanks. I'm just writing this down. So what they were trying to get at was that, like, right now we're spending that money at Bay Ridge Park, right, which is going to be open in 1 month's time. And then this move, I think, according to that chart, is they're going to be moved over to the community center in 2025. Like, the concern is just like, are we, you know, it's like, to lack of better word, are we wasting the money to, you know, to convert them? I don't know. So it's like an additional $30,000. That's what we're saying then, eh?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. At the time of the Bay Ridge Park court rebuild project, the Henderson challenges were very common to staff. And the addition of the 4 dedicated pickleball courts was a quick reaction to relocate the challenges that we see in Henderson, and was identified as a short-term solution to accommodate dedicated pickleball courts. Because we have heard from the community that dedicated pickleball courts are a service level that is desired. Mm-hmm. And we did identify through the planning process at Bay Ridge Park that we are immediately adjacent to a residential community that has been established and been in that area for a long time. And we took into consideration some noise attenuation through berming, and, you know, it's staff's hope that it doesn't become a problem. And, you know, we will need to respond when those courts open and monitor. That's certainly our intention. Whereas in the Cataraqui West Community Park, it's a large community park in a new subdivision where we are going through the master planning process now, and we can take into consideration the long-term planning through a new park design component that we're currently going through.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, so when Bay Ridge opens in 1 month time, and if there is a lot of noise for pickleball, who do we direct the complaints to?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you can send those to myself and our team, and we'll continue to work with our counterparts in Recreation and Leisure Services to see if there's some temporary measures that could be considered. We're certainly hopeful that the conflict doesn't exist, and we can have an exciting new asset in our community, and everyone can enjoy from it.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I had initially concerns with, even though last year, I wanted to fast track the courts at Bell Park because of so much that has happened there over the last year, even more so than in 2020, 2021. And then over the last year, I was worried, but now since you sent the chart of the timeline, so if we accelerate the pickleball at Bell Park, and the 2 tennis and the 12 pickleball courts, we're not looking until 2024. Is that right, Mr. Falwell?
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that's correct. And the acceleration at Bell Park is adding 4 additional dedicated pickleball courts. So the current master plan identifies 2 tennis and 8 pickleball. So that the acceleration component at Bell Park is the addition of those 4 pickleball courts for a total of 12.
Okay.
Bell Park Phase 1 was deferred early in the pandemic, and staff recognized that there are some challenges and other matters that will need to be addressed at Bell Park in the coming years. And but it's still our recommendation to try and encourage active recreation throughout the city where possible, and begin the planning process so that we can have that engagement and continued conversation about the exciting work that was done through the Bell Park master planning process.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, a question about the tennis wall. So where it says that there's a proposed tennis wall in the West End in the year 2030, do we have any idea where in the West End that tennis wall might go?
Thank you for the question, through you, Mr. Chair. We haven't identified a specific location, Councillor, and we'd certainly take recommendations and suggestions, and we'll continue through feedback from the public and yourselves to consider locations. And same would be for Kingston East as well. We haven't identified a location. We'd want to identify one that's likely close to similar amenities, tennis and sport courts, preferably. Our information shows that, it's not a standalone asset that is well used, but sometimes if there is one near a tennis court or a pickleball court, it could get some overflow and some activity, but not something that's just standalone. And we're suggesting in this implementation plan that Compton Park would receive such a wall because there are like amenities in that park currently.
Okay, thank you. And then my last area of concern then is to do with Henderson Court, right? So it looks like the Henderson tennis courts are being proposed in 2025 to be rebuilt. Just looking, court marking removal, and then Henderson 2026. And that's when they go down to 4 tennis courts. And this was also a concern, it would be a loss of 2 tennis courts in the West End when, according to the last census data, our population has just grown 7%, which we didn't know last year in 2021. And also we do have, the most residential build up in the West End. So more people living here, not wanting to drive, across the city, wanting to, do a short drive or even ride their bikes, into a neighborhood. And I have a huge concern with the loss of 2 tennis courts at Henderson Park. Now, the report talked about the grassed area, that if we were to rebuild the courts in 2026 and then keep 6 courts, but make them regulation size, that we would have to lose some of the grassed area. And I know that because we talked about this last year in April in 2021, that the grassed area is used, some of the grassed area is used in the winter time as an ice rink, a community hockey rink. And so what does staff recommend? Because I'm going to move an amendment one way or another right now to keep 6 tennis courts at Henderson. So is it better, in staff's opinion, to move the ice hockey rink to Jim Beattie Park, which is just like 2 blocks away to the west of Henderson tennis courts? Or is it better that we do the motion to keep 6 tennis courts at Henderson, and that would mean that we just rebuild them to the same size that they are right now, which is not regulation size, but I play a lot at Henderson. I've never heard anyone say to me that the courts are too small there. I've never had like a run-in with somebody, like a close call. I've never done that. And I know that that's why we lost some courts at Bay Ridge, right? Bay Ridge was 6 tennis courts, and now it's going to be open in 1 month's time with just 3 tennis courts, and then the other courts being those 4 dedicated pickleball courts, right? But as far as I'm concerned, Henderson can just be rebuilt to the same size as right now, because that's how they've been, and we're not butting elbows or anything playing there right now. So which is best in staff's terms, to lose the grass, move the ice hockey to Jim Beattie, or to build Henderson to the same size as exists today when they get rebuilt?
Thank you for the question. Through you, Mr. Chair. Councillor, I don't have enough information on the usage of the hockey rink and what could be possible at another location. I recognize that it is just down the street, so you would think that it could be relocated without too many challenges. But I know there's other things that are happening at Jim Beattie now and planned for the future as well, including a possible future splash pad. So, you know, I'd be cautious in relocating one asset without taking into consideration the planning for the other park. In terms of, you know, what is happening at Bay Ridge, correct, we have reduced through the process of design and construction from the equivalent of 6 tennis courts to essentially 4, the space for 4 full-size tennis courts, and that would be a similar situation for Henderson. It has existed. I recognize that, but when we renovate a park, we recommend taking in consideration the current standards at the time and providing some additional space around the perimeter of the property, because it is certainly right up adjacent to the residents. But we also know that there have been challenges with parking, which would need to be considered, and further conversation with Lakeshore Pool to consider maybe a joint parking improvements that could happen at that location. But so I'm not sure if I fully answer your question. And something else, I guess I should point out, is the equivalent tennis court and distribution in the West. So the implementation plan identifies 4 in Henderson, 4 in Bay Ridge Park, and 2 in Cat West, which is an increase in the service level in Kingston West. And through the master planning process, we identified the distribution of courts across the city, both west, central, and east, from tennis, basketball, pickleball, and other amenities as well. So the benefit of Cataraqui West allows for lighting in the future. Staff are not recommending lighted courts at Bay Ridge or Henderson either. So, you know, when we include the lighted element as well, that gives us an extra court essentially. So we would have 4 + 4 + 3. So that would be the total tennis courts in Kingston West through the planning period.
And let me just think, there's one other spinoff. So just so what I was just saying about moving to Jim Beattie, it is only an outdoor rink that right now gets boards put on the grass and then the boards removed. So it's not actually creating any infrastructure at Jim Beattie for the summertime. It's just boards and flooding, just like at Woodbine Park, part of the parking lot gets flooded and boards put in. It would be like, that's what we're saying for Jim Beattie, has nothing to do with summertime and, you know, a splash pad or anything like that. But we don't even have to worry about that if when the time comes to rebuild Henderson courts, that they're just built on the same footprint you have with 6 courts as they exist today, 6 tennis courts with that footprint. So I do want to move the amendment. I was trying to remember what my other question was before I move the amendment. Maybe it was Community West. I'm not sure. I guess maybe it was this. If at Bay Ridge Park, and we have those 4 dedicated pickleball courts, if noise does not become an issue at all, could we still keep those courts at Bay Ridge? And also when the time comes in 4 years' time to build out the Cataraqui West Community Park, can we still get those pickleball courts at Community West Park?
Thank you, and through you. So staff are going through the planning process for Cataraqui West Park now. So it's our recommendation to proceed with the 6 at that location. So it was identified in the Parks and Rec master plan,
Okay.
and is currently being designed. So that is the intention.
Okay.
So there could be further conversation certainly about Bay Ridge Park. One thing I would recommend to council and in the committee is that if Henderson is to be rebuilt as 6 courts, that we don't rebuild them as the current size from a liability perspective, is that we rebuild 6 courts to the current regulation. So maybe we could, staff would recommend that it be the total number of courts be preserved, but maybe not get into the footprint because it is tight. And I haven't reached out to legal in terms of what that is, but we would certainly want to meet the current regulation at the time. So.
Okay, well, I want to move my amendment then. The clerk Sullivan, he has it.
Hi, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. We have not yet actually moved the motion on to the floor, so we can't.
Oh, okay.
Any motions.
Good. Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Also, I think we should hear from the rest of the committee because these things are obviously all interlocking pieces. What's taken away in one place is often replaced with something like it in another place. And so staff have a mini master plan about these changes. So, and I think it mentions liability in the report, actually. Maybe it's just a small bit, but I think I read that. And legal's already opined on that, just so we know. So anyone else from the committee got a comment or 3? No movement. Councillor Bohm has already got his East Side Community Center, so he doesn't care. No, I'm just teasing, The I've got a question, and currently, and you can correct me, just jump in and correct me, Mr. Fowle, but and this has to do with Bell Park. It's planned to have 8 dedicated pickleball courts and 2 tennis courts where they are now located because we know what the conditions are. The other conditions were more expensive to put in, and the report says that. And I think Senate, was it an additional 1.5 million or something like that? I didn't write it down, but there's additional costs. And the thing that caught my eye though was we went through this very intense community negotiation about the Bell Park Master Plan, as you're probably well aware. And we finally decided, okay, well, the pickleball courts and the 2 tennis courts, and we should be happy there. But the cost of putting in additional pickleball courts comes at the cost of deferring other project components. And that concerns me because by far the biggest users of that park, in fact, by far the largest parks and recreation users, are walkers and hikers and dog walkers and that sort of thing. And the Bell Park phase 1 is, I think you said it was deferred 1 year, but I think it was deferred before that as well. due to the pandemic and other, competing capital costs. So I'm very concerned about postponing it yet again. And I have a feeling that my constituents and maybe other people throughout the community who use Bell Park are not really aware that this is the trade-off here. And I'm not surprised. I'm glad it was pointed out. It's very important to realize that, extra things done mean less things elsewhere. And that should be pointed out, and it has been. So I would like to know more about what you're deferring, since we're supposed to be putting trails in there, and as far as I know, we haven't done anything yet. So those are my concerns, and I wish for more commentary from staff about what's being deferred, because to me, I don't see the justification for the additional pickleball courts when we already accommodated pickle courts, the refurbishment of, the redevelopment of pickleball courts, and 2 tennis courts to boot.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. So phase 1 Bell Park is the project that was deferred early in the pandemic. And what we're recommending in this report is that we split phase 1 into A and B. A being the courts as described within the report, the tennis and the pickleball, advancing the long-term 4 additional courts to be constructed at the same time. And your recollection is correct that the footprint is outside the existing footprint, and we have factored in the potential additional cost to construct those 4 additional courts. And that is included in the implementation increase of $1.7 million over the planning period. So that is there as part of that. The phase 1 project, building sport courts, is not a unique trade, but it is a specific trade that we can put on the market in a very clear and concise package and have it constructed most efficiently. And the conversation can happen with the public more expeditiously as well, where including the conversation on phase 1B, which would be components related to dog park, trails and playgrounds, is what staff are recommending to be pushed by 1 year in order to allow for further conversation and to expedite the pickleball or the sport court component of phase 1. So the overall deferral would be by 1 year to allow for the phase 1B components to happen a year later.
How much does it cost to start the design and the trail construction? Like with the money you're taking away for the pickleball, and I have to say, the number of people interested in pickleball through the whole Bell Park thing in my district is very small. I mean, really minute. Okay, so it's much more the walkers and so on, and then there's the problem of ticks and everything else. So you need pathways of some construction to be able to use the space, and the construction of the community presentation area, right? I'm not going to go through the whole plan, but so continues still to be a problem with me, because I look at the rejigged capital budget, and I'm sympathetic to the pickleball players, but they're exponentially doing better than any other group in this plan. They're up to 37 courts when all's said and done. You can correct me, just jump in and correct me if I'm wrong. And tennis courts are coming and going. It was hard to figure out what was going on there. And then, like I say, it seems to me we're shortchanging that which benefits more, in fact, most of the population. Because most of the population are not pickleball players. They're enthusiastic and all that, but there's only a few hundred of them. like, as we know. So I don't know if you have anything more to say about that. I got the plan. It's my problem is I don't think I agree with the plan. And I mean, other parts of it, it's very, as Councillor Stanek just found out, it's very complex. And I don't pretend to know those parks or neighborhoods well enough to say much more than it's probably a good plan. So anything more to say on that?
I guess I could add, there are other things that will be happening around Bell Park. We're working with our partners in transportation in the Major Projects Office to connect a waterfront multi-use pathway along the KMP Trail. That's a project that will follow in the next couple of years as well. So there will be, there will be those components those weren't part of the original Bell Park Master Plan. They're known separate initiatives that were running in parallel and certainly referenced through the Bell Park Master Plan. So there are other things, certainly, Councillor, but I do recognize that there's other amenities, and it was a very lengthy and very engaging process through the Bell Park working group and others and certainly the public to develop the long range plan for Bell Park. This was staff believed that it could be an easier implementation process to do the courts and some site improvements separate from the other amenities, which certainly do require additional engagement with the public, a more involved engagement plan and process, and could take longer and potentially shift that phase 1A implementation as a result. I'm not saying that's a sure thing, but that could certainly happen because, from an engagement and conversation to develop sport courts is a relatively simple process. Here's where the courts are going. This is the size. It's a more of an informed level engagement. So it's much easier to implement that format of a project. And that's staff's reasoning for the adjustment. And not to take away from all the other things that were exciting in the phase 1B, as we're calling it, that we would anticipate and welcome a more detailed engagement with the public to ensure that those amenities for those more local, and certainly Bell Park is a destination park. And we were certainly looking to attract residents from across the city and beyond to engage in the development of that plan. So it's a little bit easier, I guess, to ultimately be honest with council, to develop it in 2 phases and to implement it under the timelines that we've identified in this plan.
So underlying that in part is that the capital, it's logistically and possibly financially better idea to do the 4 extra courts when you're there already.
That's correct. Yes,
Yep.
100%. That's correct.
Okay. Well, I haven't decided what to do here, but I see your argument. Okay, and the thought process. So, any other comments on this report, Councillor Neal?
Just one quick comment about pickleball. I know that we have a number of courts now, unlike a lot of municipalities. We have a number that are dedicated pickleball courts. And a very good friend of my son who lives in Victoria raved about being able to come here for a tournament and how much he enjoyed visiting Kingston. Can you tell me if there are any future tournaments planned? And do you anticipate that number of pickleball courts being a positive attraction for tournaments that will bring people to Kingston?
Thank you. And through you, Mr. Chair, I may need to pass some of this over to my partners in Recreation and Leisure, but I can say that the Canadian National Pickleball Championship is currently happening at the Invista Center, and there's 28 courts within the 4 ice pads. So that's a national championship. So they need that level and total number of courts. currently the city of Kingston does not have any dedicated outdoor pickleball courts. So the first step that we were looking to implement was certainly Bell Park to get the 8. And ultimately the 12 was identified through the original consultation that 12 dedicated pickleball courts could host an outdoor event. Certainly, 16, 20 would be wonderful, but I think staff recommended a balance in terms of distribution and not recommending certainly, 16 or 20 in one specific location with Grenadier courts across the new crossing, relatively close distance. I recognize that's not ideal for tournament organization, but something that was received well. 12 dedicated courts in one location could accommodate a lower grade outdoor tournament.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Mr. Kirk, I presume we would now go to the public if we, I don't have a
That is-
participant. I don't have a
Sorry.
participant thing, so I don't know who's there.
Certainly, I can help with this. So there are currently 6 members of the public in the public viewing gallery. If you would like to make a comment at this time, please find the virtual little yellow hand button at the bottom of your screen on Zoom, and that will alert us that you would like to speak to this matter. I'll just give them a few minutes to see if anyone would like to speak. I see Debbie Thompson. Sorry about that, Ms. Thompson. It seems that there's some interference with your audio there.
It's because we see Debbie Thompson logged in twice. So if Ms. Thompson, if you weren't logged in twice, it's the feedback, audio feedback, because somehow you're logged in twice.
Is that better now? Can you hear me?
Yes. Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, hear me now. I was thinking that you can't hear me.
Ms. Thompson, and through you, Mr. Chair, I can remove the second Debbie Thompson from the viewing gallery, and that might be able to help. Give me 5 moments.
That will do it for sure.
Is that better now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. That part is fine, except for that is still the east of town.
Perhaps if you totally log off both and do a fresh entrance, it might work.
Okay.
I will, through you, Mr. Chair, I will now lower her hand. We will move on to Robert Herbose.
Okay. Mr. Bose?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I just would like to make a few comments based on the discussions I've heard to date about the projects, especially as they relate to the West End. In response to the question from Councillor McLaren as to the number of courts, Currently, we're looking at 8 courts in the West End. There's 4 multi-use courts at Anderson and 4 dedicated court at Bay Ridge. Now, if the 4 dedicated courts at Bay Ridge, there is some noise issues, those will disappear. And you'll only be ending up with 6 courts in the West End at the new, what's the location? The Cataraqui West. So you're losing 2 courts in that situation. In addition to a comment that Councillor Osanik was making, you don't want people to be driving half an hour to get to another part of town to go play tennis. Well, it's the same thing for pickleball. Why should the people in the West End end up driving, let's say, 45 minutes altogether back and forth to get to the courts in Bell Park? Especially as part of the plan now, the city is looking at also adding 4 more courts around Shannon Park, which is maybe 5-minute drive from Bell Park. So all that area is going to be ending up with 16 courts. Is that a proper balance for the city? Yes, I agree with what Mr. Fowle has been saying, that yeah, everything's going to be great. There's going to be 26 courts. But look at the distribution. Look at Exhibit H, I think, that shows you the map where the courts are going to be. You're going to have 6 permanent courts in the West End. You're going to have 4 in the East End. And then you're looking at 16 courts in the center. And it's not really the center. It's by Bell Park, which is pretty well to the east end of the center. So I'm just looking at this and saying, for the people in the West End, listen, I live in the East End. I'm okay with all these, but I'm saying I go play it with people in the West End at Anderson, at the Royal Kingston Curling Club, the Boys and Girls Club. I have to travel that distance to go play there. And I'm sure they're not going to appreciate the same thing. That I don't really like it right now, but I do it. But let's look at our plans and say, let's do a proper allocation of the courts, especially these days with the price of gas and everything else. It's getting ridiculous. So why push people to get in their car? We're talking about climate change and everything else, inflation and everything else. So why are we pushing to get people to get into their car and drive to play an outdoor sport where they could walk to it? They could take their bikes or take a small drive to the courts.
Okay.
That's pretty well my feedback on what I've heard today. So
Sure. How many hands have, you know what? There's so few people in the public here, Mr. Clerk. I think we'll take these one at a time, because this is a fairly complicated proposal here. So, Mr. Falwell, could you respond to Mr. Rubos, please?
I'm not sure I caught a question, Councillor, regarding the distribution of courts. Is that what you're referring to?
The central idea is that we're removing courts like the multi-use in the West, and we're adding a few, but in the end, when by his observation is that most of the courts are ending up in the center of the city, and that causes people to travel further than perhaps we would like them to do to play their sport. And he doesn't think the distribution of courts is fairly done. The word fairly is mine, not his.
Sure, understood. And the resident provided some additional opportunities that exist at indoor facilities as well, which is great, through other partners in the community, at the Royal Kingston Curling Club at Days and in Front Road, the Boys and Girls Club on Bath. The Pickleball Club has recently opened a new indoor facility at Gardner's and Cataraqui Woods Drive. So there's lots of great, exciting things happening. There's new indoor facilities in Kingston East coming along too in the future. So yeah, there are great things happening. Distribution is a challenge across all of our amenities. If we look at ice rinks, we have 7 ice rinks in Kingston West, 1 in the center and 0 in the east. So, you know, staff through other master planning process, Shannon Park, a reference facility, went through a master planning process and land was preserved through that design to accommodate a future 2 tennis or multi-court solution, which is recommended in this situation. And each community is different. Shannon Park has seen and will continue to see amazing improvements and revitalization, a community that walks more often than drives. So having courts closer is a benefit to that very specific community, and each community is different. So it's the distribution, it's a challenge, and staff have looked at it and discussed the distribution through the original update to the Parks and Rec master plan. And you know, dedicated courts were a big thing. And that's mostly what we're talking about here tonight, is the enhancement of implementing new dedicated pickleball courts and where possible, reducing multi-use and adding multi-use in areas where it could be accommodated.
Right. Okay, so the important part that I took from there, because I can't bring Mr. Herbois back, is that the indoor facilities that are coming online in both the east and the west would be year-round facilities, some of them. And so that will increase availability and shorten.
Yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, and I didn't mean to complicate the conversation.
No.
Certainly Royal Kingston Curling Club is primary use as a curling club. So they provide some off curling season opportunities, which is great. Boys and Girls Club is, it can be year round, but certainly we know and we encourage people to get outdoors when they can. So, and you know, I didn't include city facilities that accommodate indoor pickleball as well, Rideau Heights, and more recently Kingston East Community Center. And they each have their own challenges, but the city does provide indoor opportunities outside of some of those private or non-city operated facilities.
Okay. Mr. Clerk, is there anyone else?
There are currently 3 other members of the public in the viewing gallery that have not had a chance to speak. To those members, if you'd like to speak, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. Give them just a little longer, Mr. Chair.
Sure, give it a couple of minutes. I just say that anyone of the public is invited to give us their comments or ask questions, and we would be more than willing to hear them.
I see Angela Baldwin, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Ms. Baldwin, please go ahead.
Hello?
Hello, we can hear you.
Hi. Hi. I just kind of wanted to support what Bob said. I guess what I think he means is, did staff look beyond where you already have sites for pickleball and tennis and see if there were any other potential locations that hadn't been previously used that would distribute the use of the court use throughout the city more fairly, because the city is pretty spread out now, and where all of those courts have been built, that was years and years ago. And you know, the theory is if you build it, they will come, and sure, people will come, because trust me, people are playing this sport everywhere. But I just wonder if the city staff were able to look beyond the previous the already located spots where we have these places.
Go ahead, Mr. Falwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, staff did look at all of our existing assets, and a very thorough process was completed as part of the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. And we did identify locations generally where new assets like dedicated pickleball courts could go. And in addition to that, the direction from council at the time of the approval was to increase or speed up the implementation plan. So, but even through that speeding up of the implementation plan, we took another look at where else could some of this happen. And staff are, with pickleball specifically, it's not something that we would be recommending to put in a local park at this time. So it needs to be a larger park. And we are limited in some of those assets across the city.
Right. Okay, thank you, Councillor Neil. Please.
It's the first time you've ever called me Mr.
I regret it already.
Just a quick question for Luke, if I can. I know that we're going to hear in item 3 about the possibility of some changes with Center 70, I believe, rather than having to replace their ice machine, that there may, at some future time, be double pads at the Memorial Center. If that happens, would Center 70 be a logical place where you could put indoor courts that could serve that area? And I may be jumping the gun. I see Mr. Hugenbus jumped in, but that is a possibility as I understand it. So.
Yeah, thank you. And Chair, I'll jump in here. Thank you, Councillor Neil. I think there's a lot of opportunity for Center 70 if a lot of things happen over an extended number of years. So we're going to hear a report later on in the agenda about the potential for 2 rinks at Memorial Center and to repurpose the Center 70. But that repurposing would need to go through a needs assessment and a discussion with the community. Sorry, a little loud here. That would understand what are the potential options from a recreation perspective for Center 70, whether it be a senior center or indoor courts or other sports that are under service from an indoor perspective. And we're talking a few years out as well, Councillor Neil. So I think that would be a strategy that would have to go through a full engagement process as for the master plan.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Anybody else from the public?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are currently 2 members of the public in the public viewing gallery that have not had a chance to speak. Just a reminder again, if they would wish to speak, just raise your virtual hand in Zoom. The button is located at the center of your screen at the bottom.
Right.
And we'll just give them a few moments.
And again, I issue an invitation to those 2 people. Now is the time to speak up. There'll be other opportunities later, much later, but still necessary. Still here.
I am not seeing their hands up at this moment.
Okay, so we'll go back to the committee. And we need to put the motion on the floor, the recommendation on the floor. Councillor Neil moves, Councillor Sanik seconds. Okay, it's now open to comments and questions from the committee. Who wishes to kick this off? Councillor Sanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So through you, I do want to make an amendment that in the next several years, when the Henderson courts get rebuilt, that they be rebuilt with 6 tennis courts. This was an issue last year at the April master plan meeting. There is a lot of tennis players that had the concern that Henderson was going from 6 courts down to 4 courts. And, tonight's report is still showing that it's going from 6 courts to 4 courts. And we just heard the member of the public, Bob, right, who talked about how the West End, doesn't have as many courts as the rest of Kingston.
Okay. You can continue if you wish. I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, that's it.
That's what I thought, but okay. Other comments from people on the committee? Councillor Bone.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. I just want to understand a little bit more the idea of going from 6 to 4 courts. I'll preface that with, are we hosting a lot of tournaments there? Are the courts technically undersized right now? Do they need to be? Does it need to go from 6 to 4? I'm not sure I understand the rationale there, because I understand from the public side of things, it just seems like a loss. So from the other side of it, what's the gain if we go from 6 to 4?
Thank you, and through you. The ultimate gain is that a more equal distribution across the city of tennis courts is achieved.
Okay, so it's not a concern about the existing courts being too small or anything like that?
The existing courts do not meet the current regulation. So yes, they are too small in terms of current regulation. And staff would not recommend to council to rebuild them with the current footprint that's available for the tennis courts. We would take a similar approach to what was completed at Bay Ridge Park, where there were 6 courts, and on a very similar footprint, we're constructing the equivalent of 4 new tennis courts at the current regulation size.
Okay, has there been any tournaments held there in the last little bit? Is it preventing that? Has the public, I guess, complained about the size of them?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of tournaments. I see Lucretia, she's shaking her head. Not aware of tournaments. Our tournament organizers in Kingston tournaments typically have to happen at the Kingston Tennis Club off of Napier Street, where they're organized. Now, there certainly could be informal tournaments that happen that staff are not aware of. Certainly that happens more regularly with the format that pickleball is played in. It can happen very quickly and efficiently, but I'm not aware of tournaments on our tennis courts that are happening.
Okay. If the amendment were to pass and we were to go and rebuild the 6 there instead of the new 4, would there be any real budget concerns there? Would there be a significant change in the allotted funds to do so, or would it be pretty like for like?
It would increase, certainly. So we'd be adding about 30%, 33% of size and footprint to the actual court reconstruction.
So if we were just rebuilt the 6 that were there, the same size, how would it, I don't understand how it would increase. If we just literally just refreshed what was there, so to speak, would that change I believe that's the intention of the motion. Correct me if I'm wrong, Councillor Osanik. Or sorry, the amendment.
Yes.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Some of our assets have gone beyond their ability to just continue to resurface or repaint lines. We saw that with Bay Ridge, where ultimately we had 6 courts, but only 4 were safe to be used. So nets were actually removed. So with a renovation that's recommended for Henderson, where it's a tiered, there's a bit of a step on the north courts to get up. Staff would be recommending that they be constructed to a new standard so that we can maintain that asset in a more ideal or very good condition going forward.
Okay, so if we did like for like I'm still not sure the footprint would change even if we rebuilt them the exact same size as what's there now. I'm not following how what's there now, if we just tore it all out and rebuilt it, how that would increase the size.
It wouldn't meet the current regulations. So you could get 4 courts on the existing 6 court footprint.
Okay, but it is possible to do what the amendment asks though, correct? Where they wouldn't meet the new regulation, or would we be in breach of some type of rule or something like that?
Would it be possible to see the amendment? just so I understand the specific question. So it would be staff's interpretation to maintain 6 courts at this location, but not necessarily in the same location. That's how staff would interpret that.
Okay, and not necessarily the same size. So what this in that staff be direct. So based on the wording of this, I believe it could be interpreted that you would rebuild 6 tennis courts at the new regulation size. So okay. So that's where the budget impact comes from. Is there sufficient budget anywhere in the city to actually do that? Or would this amendment need to be reworded to say that rebuild 6 courts within the existing footprint, the same size as the existing courts?
As described earlier, staff wouldn't recommend that, certainly in terms
Right.
of potential liability. So I think we'd want to be careful of that, but the cost, it would be above and beyond the 1.7 million that is identified in this implementation plan. I don't have that number here, Councillor, but it would be an increase,
Okay. I guess on the liability side of things, I'm struggling with that a little bit. I just don't like, is it to the point of if somebody were to get hurt, like, just humor me for a second. If we rebuilt them exactly the way they were at the existing size and somebody were to get hurt, like, where does the liability come from? Right now, they'd be grandfathered, so to speak, because they've existed so long in that state. But if we were to rebuild them, are we as a city, or, with a master plan and everything in sports, supposed to or obligated to rebuild them to the new standards and the new regulations to increase safety and separation? Is that, I'm just trying to understand the liability side of things.
Yeah, I think I'm not an expert either, Councillor, so I apologize. I may not have the right answer, but I think we just want to make sure, and we could report back as part of the direction in this motion to outline those potential risks to council at that time. We certainly would do that. So I'm not sure if it's necessary to get right down into that this evening. And it's certainly something we would take into consideration and provide those options to council and indicate, based on X, Y, and Z, staff's opinion that this could happen and our liability is limited, or could indicate that it's not, staff do not recommend utilizing the existing footprint and that they should be designed and constructed to the new standard. So I think it could be either of those things would be certainly outlined very clearly in our report, and that direction is clear in the motion amendment.
So I'm almost reluctant to make a decision without that information, because without knowing the liability side of it and really the true budget impact, can we defer this to get that information? Because I mean, it is kind of key. I completely understand where Councillor Sanik's coming from, but we also have a responsibility to the city and to the other residents to not increase the city's liability if there's a significant liability there. And we're starting to go just rebuilding things to standards that were out of date, 20 years ago. So I struggle to make a decision without that information. Is there a risk? Is this time sensitive, this report tonight?
I think you could be, go ahead, Mr. Falwell.
I think, I'm not sure that the decision or the amendment holds council to any commitment going forward, because it indicates that we need to report back on that option in 2026. So we're a few years away from that. We wouldn't want to make a recommendation on regulations in 2022 for something we're going to build 4 years later either. So it would be staff's suggestion that, when the time comes to have the conversation and do a detailed analysis, and, the conditions will change between now and 4 years. So I think I'm not sure.
We can go in 2 minutes, everyone.
It is. I think staff have enough direction through the amendment that we would bring back all the necessary information to council to make an informed decision at that time.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That clears the air on that. Thank you.
I just want to add something. Mr. Falwell also talked about construction considerations and impacts on Jim Beattie Park earlier, to do with the ice rink and so on. So I guess I'm asking whether that would also be part of the report, because clearly you have to take all those things into account. Sounds like staff has at least done preliminary work on that, so.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, that'd be in the reports. But to Councilor Sanik's earlier comment, Woodbine has a outdoor skating rink on a parking lot. You know, there are other solutions out there that could be considered. And again, that would form part of our reporting back to council in terms of the displacement of an existing amenity. Other things could change. I've mentioned a parking lot component that may need to be required to help alleviate some of the current challenges. But again, with the recommended removal of pickleball at this location and reverting back to dedicated tennis, maybe those pressures aren't as significant. But again, you know, when you build a new asset, we certainly see an immediate influx, which is great and exciting. And we just want to make sure that we can sustain that. And so that would be something to take into consideration.
Okay, so I take from that we can entertain this amendment, and that will result in a report back. I have only one concern. It says we should consult with the residents in the area, I guess. Should we be consulting with the residents before we get all our ducks in a row? We could be consulting about something that legal says, I don't think so, right? Or the construction aspects are too difficult to get around.
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff would do that preliminary due diligence before reaching out to the public. We would want to provide all of the information and facts to have the conversation. And then, you know, we want to be open and honest with our residents in terms of what can happen. So we would do all that due diligence in advance.
And the committee would see that before we got consulting and all that, if it was significant. Right, okay. All right, any other comments on the amendment as proposed? Seeing none. I think we are going to call for a vote here. All those in favor of the amendment? That passes unanimously. Okay, so now we're back to the main motion as amended. Any other comments there? I think that that I have an amendment, which is to the plan that's currently proposed, okay? And that is that that the recommendation be maintained as option A, which is the current plan and was proposed before. And as I understand the report, and we were talking about earlier, B involves 4 additional pickleball courts and the dropping and postponing of the pathway and other amenities that are proposed. So what I'm saying is, I think I'd be remiss, wouldn't be representing my constituents properly, according to what they understood is supposed to be going on. And we've deferred this at least a couple of times already. People could say, when are they going to start? When they're going to start? And so I'm moving that we maintain the current plan A. And Mr. Falwell, have I worded that properly?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I believe what you're suggesting is that staff implement the Bell Park Master Plan as originally intended.
Yes.
Which would mean that the advancement of 4 additional dedicated pickleball courts would not happen in the short term. And
right, and you would go ahead with the rest, correct?
That's my interpretation of I believe what you're indicating. So
yeah, that's what I'm interested in.
The recommendation in this implementation plan is to advance 4 additional dedicated pickleball courts at Bell Park in Phase 1A, and to defer Phase 1B, which is the other amenities in the park in the original Phase 1 of Bell
Oh, I
Park.
see. Okay.
So I believe what you're suggesting is that staff implement the original Bell Park Master Plan implementation Phase 1.
In the Bell, as it relates to Bell Park.
Yes.
I'm not trying to mess with anybody else's situation.
No, but the deferral of the 4 additional dedicated pickleball courts would happen at a later date.
Yeah, as was planned.
As was planned, yes.
Right. Okay.
Pardon me,
So-
Mr. Chair. I would just need that motion to amend in writing, please.
How am I going to do that?
Just through email if possible.
I
And
think that involves an unnecessary delay. This is a very simple motion to maintain the current.
fair enough, Mr. Chair.
Pardon?
Fair enough, Mr. Chair. I agree with you.
Okay. So I think Mr. Falwell put it very clearly. So, Councillor Bohm, I'll get to you in 1 second. I won't miss you. I'm just trying to get this straightened out. So, Mr. Clerk, have you got that change?
I haven't put it on a slide yet. I am trying to do that now.
Okay, fair enough.
And
In the meantime,
through you,
yep,
Councillor,
go ahead.
maybe we could just talk through it one more time,
Sure.
just so I'm clear. So the direction or the amendment would be that staff be directed to implement the Bell Park Master Plan Phase 1 project as intended.
Yeah, the only intention is to postpone those 4 additional pickleball courts. And I understand their arguments for it. We went through that. It was very clear. And continue on with the master plan as originally conceived. So
Yep.
Same wording, basically.
Yes, the report in front of the committee this evening is suggesting that the 4 additional dedicated pickleball courts, which were planned for a future phase of Bell Park, would be advanced.
Yes.
And what I understand is the councillor is suggesting that we just implement Bell Park Master Plan as originally approved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With regard to Bell Park.
Yes. Yes. Specific to Bell Park.
All
Yep.
the other changes and the amendment and all that, the Councillor saying, I'm fine with.
All right, I have very rough wording. Hopefully I got it through. I'm going to just ask that my meeting host throw it up on the.
Sure. Thank you,
Okay.
Mr. Clerk.
No worries.
Does that suit you, Mr. Falwell? Can you read that?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, that staff be directed to implement the Bell Park Phase 1 Master Plan as originally approved.
So you would like
So
the
it's just a
verb,
few changes at the front end, Mr. Clerk. Staff be directed to implement the Bell Park Phase 1 Master Plan as originally approved.
okay. Implement needs an E in it, but other than that, it looks like it's okay. There you go. Thank you. All right, that's my motion. I need a seconder, if anyone's willing to second it. And also, once we second it, Councillor Bohm can say what he's got to say. I can't see, so there's no seconder here? Oh, Councillor Neal. I can't see Councillor Sanic, but I presume she's here someplace. So,
Councillor Sanic has left the meeting.
oh, she has. Oh, okay. All right. I'm glad you just told me. Thank you. Okay, so Councillor Bohm, you had your hand up a long time ago.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And through, Councillor Osanik sends her regrets. She had another commitment at 7 o'clock that she had to take off to. As far as this amendment, I just want to understand a bit more from staff's perspective. where the proposal came from to advance the 4 courts in Bell Park, and at what were we delaying to pull that up? Because right now the pressure does definitely seem to be from the pickleball community. So I would be hesitant to vote in favor of this amendment without really understanding what the trade-off is, simply because if we're going to delay and go back to the original plan to get a few walking trails and things like that, I'm just not sure that's a fair trade-off, because there's already lots of spots that we can walk in the city. So I believe that there's been a lot of consultation and a lot of community pressure to advance those courts. So to go back on that now might cause more issues than it solves.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Mr. Chair. So staff took the original direction to advance the implementation of both tennis and pickleball. And certainly some of the low-hanging fruit was Bell Park, where we had identified a future 4 additional courts. So that was an easy one to recommend in terms of advancement. Certainly the 12-pack identified was a desire at the time, certainly of the pickleball community, for some of the reasons I've previously explained. We would still design for those future additional pickleball courts in the phase 1. We would preserve for that space, and they could be constructed at a later date in line with the originally approved plan, which was later on in potentially phase 3, when we would also identify, or we have identified in this implementation plan, the addition of lights. So it would coincide with another future capital project at Bell Park, and it would make sense to do some of that infrastructure at that time.
Okay. I guess my hesitation is also that, knowing what I know and seeing how when you're starting to push a project out 10 years, or I think in some of them, they're not going to get lights until 2033. So a lot's going to change in 10 years. Maybe many of us won't even be around this table. There'll be new studies, there'll be new rules, there'll be new requirements. So I kind of look at it, if it's not in the plan in the next 4 years, there's no real guarantee that it's going to happen. So I don't think I'll support the amendment, because I feel like advancing that down there, the benefits of pulling that forward for the pickleball community, kudos to them. They've been great advocates for their sport. It is something that really is being played by a lot of seniors and allows them to get more active. And a lot of our other facilities in the city tend to be designed for, at times, younger sports and more and people of a different age group. So I know that hearing that, I really think that this will create a ripple effect throughout the rest of the plan, even though it's unintended, because as we are reducing some of those facilities and elsewhere to rebuild, there was kind of being done with the assumption that these 4 courts would be there, and now they wouldn't be until a later date. So I won't be supporting the amendment for that reason, simply because I think this is more where the community pressure point is right now. Maybe 10 years down the road, when these are built, pickleball will have subsided a bit and there'll be a different pressure point. And so then we weren't nimble enough to meet the pressure point because we delayed it too long. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Neal.
Just a quick question, if I might, for the clerk. It's my understanding that if this amendment were to fail, would the amendment go to, if it were to fail on a 2-2 vote, would it go to council to remedy, or is it only the motion that would go to council to remedy?
It's only the motion as passed that goes to council. So if the motion fails tonight, it will be noted in the minutes as having failed on a tie, but it will not go to council as to thing. And that only happens, for example, if a motion to full-on motion going to council dies on a split vote.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Okay, so I think I should probably, unless Councillor McLaren has something to say. No, I should speak in favor of my own amendment. So here's the thing. The development of the Bell Park Master Plan was years in the making. Long since forceful public pressure point, to use Councilor Bohm's points. And I think we aren't hearing from people again because they aren't aware that this is taking place within the context of another report, which was done in response to requests. The requests were fine, but it doesn't mean we have to agree with absolutely everything. So I was the counselor for that whole process, and it was on and off, and all kinds of different people, like hundreds and hundreds, thousands of people were probably involved. So part of my reason for doing that is to recognize that and give countenance and respect to that community campaign, basically, to have Bell Park, first of all, saved. Okay, it was going to be used for something else. And second of all, developed in a way which went along with what the public wanted. Now, I'll point to the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Walking and hiking and things of that sort may seem modest and not quote unquote sports, but when you put them, when they are evaluated in terms of the master plan, they are by far, and I mean legions, ahead of every other sport, every other kind of activity, which is what we're trying to do, is make it that the maximum number of people as active as reasonably possible. Now, I'm not against the sports part, obviously, and we're doing that here tonight. So all I'm saying is, when you look at that and you look at the number of courts that are being proposed, it's going up to, well, it'd be 37 minus 4, I suppose, but it's way beyond any other tennis or other considerations that were in this report. So in terms of, so for that reason, I think the pickleball court community is not going to be severely impacted by any stretch of imagination. So when you look at the numbers of participants, which the people looking forward to the development of the Bell Park are, as a city park, from a citywide park, like people, everybody goes to Lemoyne Point, Cataract Way, conservation area, or rather Little Cat, you know, the number of participants on each side, I think it's only fair to put the emphasis on the thing that the proposal, the Bell Park Master Plan, that has been developed by intensive community consultation and staff work, frankly. And it's been proposed at least a couple of times, put off, and then brought back, and so on. So I'm just asking that we honor that. That's all. And there are reasons I recognize that to vote in terms of the extra courts, but is it equitable? And I don't think it is. And so those are my reasons for putting this motion forward. So I hope you support it. Thank you. So I forgot for a second there, I'm the chair. So nothing happens unless I keep going. Anybody else got any comments? I didn't know if Councillor Neal wanted to say something, because clearly his residents also were involved in the consultations around Paul Park, and indeed people across the city. So anyway, all those I'll call the vote unless there's any objections. All those in favor of the motion, please put up your hands. So that's only one. And all those against. Oh, Councillor Neal, you voted against? No, you voted for? Okay, so that's 2-2, it fails on a tie. Is that okay with you, Councillor Neal?
Yes,
So-
and so it'll go to council on a report, won't it? Or that was just the amendment that failed? Okay, I lost track of time.
It will
Thank you very
appear in
much.
the minutes, I take it, Mr. Clerk.
You are
But-
correct, Mr. Chair.
Could you sort of do this? But could you explain, other tie votes have gone to council. So what's, and I'm not questioning you, I just want to be clear about it.
If the main motion or recommendation from a report done
Oh,
tie, it goes to council as
right,
without a recommendation from the
right,
committee.
right. But not
Motions to
amendment.
amend, no.
Okay,
Correct, Mr.
that
Chair.
that makes perfect sense. Thank you. Okay, okay, so we're back to the main recommendation. Okay, so has anybody got anything else to say? Okay, seeing no comments, last chance. Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation as a whole as amended? Councillor Neal was thinking about that. Look, we're gonna try that again. I need to know whether you're yays or nays, okay? So all those in favor, one more time. Okay, 4-0. I'm gonna probably bring this up at council too, but you know, there it is. Okay, so now I have to get out of the full screen and go back to the. Okay, now we are on to 7B, and that's station location study and response time optimization assessment. And this is from the fire chief, I think is here to speak. And about the recommendation to mitigate current and future service challenges. We're going to receive the report and he's going to speak to us, I hope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. Thank you for having taken the time to allow me to present tonight. This really started about a little more than a year ago when we embarked on our continuous quality improvement journey known as accreditation. And that involved a strategic operating plan, refreshing the fire services bylaw that happened in June, creating a community risk assessment and standards of cover. And that was prepared by the end of last year and was reviewed by a peer assessment team from across the country. And then culminated in a report to council on March 1st, where council received the community risk assessment and standards of cover. And within that document and within the report, we reported some response time gaps, and we reported to do further analysis, do a deeper dive into the data, and really understand where the gaps were. Tonight, I'm here to present those gaps and answer any questions, and with an eye, as always, to continually improve upon our response times, especially across all areas of KFR to the best of our ability. And where we can't, it's my duty to recommend and inform you of where I think that could be bolstered. Thank you.
Perhaps you could, the way these things usually go is perhaps you could point to the most critical areas that you cover in the report.
So just
because for the sake of the public, if nobody else.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand. So the data revealed that there were response time deficits in meeting our first on scene travel time. And council's approved benchmark, and the benchmark in the bylaw that we strive for is 240 seconds or 4 minutes. That's for an urban response across Kingston. The analysis and response time review identified that there was deficits in meeting the response time travel time by about 34% that affected 34% of the population, or 41,000 of Kingston's urban population. 92% of the overall population, Mr. Chair, as I'm sure you know, is within the urban fabric. So we looked at the urban area because that's where the deficits were found. And we did note, though, however, that where we were not meeting the travel time first arriving benchmarks, we did meet both in the rural and urban areas the effective response force. And for council's information, that's the amount of resources required to safely bring an event under control. So there's the first arriving travel time benchmark, which is very important when you're dealing with a range of emergencies like Kingston Fire and Rescue deals with. We know we do 1,100 medical emergencies a year. We respond to 700 fires. We do about 500 false alarms a year. And we do about 460 technical rescues, which are really MDCs. And so when we look at the 4-minute travel time, that's an industry best practice in reaching those people that are in need within that 4 minutes. That's only exclusive of the other times that we measure, which are call handling times, the time it takes for a 911 call to be processed and dispatched. The turnout time, the time it takes for firefighters to assemble, get dressed, understand where they're going, get on the trucks and respond, and then travel time, which is wheels rolling to wheels stopped at the scene. That makes up our total response time, which we also measure at the 90th percentile, as reported back in March of 2022. So where we're seeing the gaps really are on the west urban end of the city and the east urban side of the city. And that correlates strongly to growth within both of those areas, both current growth and we anticipate further growth based on the CAO's report that was presented, report 22-059. So we're noticing incremental changes in our ability to meet our travel time benchmarks in those areas. And we wish to report that and also recommend a plan that would include adjusting our current response time boundaries to optimize our response capacity, and where staff are underway working diligently together with our partners in corporate services to understand boundary changes and how we can implement those into our computer-aided dispatch systems, to change our mapping and make that a more efficient process. And also looking at the future needs and growth based on the census study that was done, which projects growth to 2026. So surprisingly, we found that there's a large portion of the west side, surprisingly and not surprisingly, we found a large portion of the west side where we could not meet that challenge. This is Station 7, which is at Woodbine Road, or Woodbine Avenue. It's twice the coverage area of all the other stations within our system in the urban area. So what we're finding there is, of course, with more area to travel, the response times are extended. But this is exacerbated with the intensification and growth within that area. And also we're noticing along the east corridor of Highway 15, there's new development and new challenges that also make it difficult. That's notwithstanding the current process around the third crossing and the causeway construction. So, you know, we're impacted by that, but that's a passing event. And we hope to see improvements when the third crossing is completed. And we're suggesting that we analyze that. We're suggesting in the report that we analyze that and report back to council on any net change to response times with respect to the third crossing and our ability to get over there. We do feel that this data is very accurate. We've involved our GIS team, our planning partners at the city, the GIS partners, our own staff, and historical response data that dates back over 4 years to get to this point. So we're really, we weren't in this position prior to our quest to become an accredited agency with a mindset of continuous quality improvement. What we do in that quest really started about 4 or 5 years ago, where we had to scrub all the data. We had to look at the accuracy of the data. We had to basically start from scratch. And this is the net effect of that. And in accordance with the bylaw, I really just wanted to make sure that we're staying current with the current state of the city in terms of growth, and also being well prepared and positioned to provide first line emergency response services up until for many more years to come. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Sure. Thank you very much for that. Have a sec here. Does the committee have any questions? Any follow-up questions on that? I think that's probably a sign they have a great deal of confidence in you and your department, Chief Armstrong. And thanks for looking at that. And I'll say something more about that in a minute, but the public, have we still got public members here?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Sure.
there are currently 3 members of the public in the viewing gallery.
Okay.
If you would like to speak on this item, please raise your virtual hand in Zoom. It is located at the middle bottom of your screen.
You see anybody?
I do not see anybody, Mr. Chair.
Okay, just pausing a minute or two here. All right, so back to the committee. And I'll just repeat what I said, that I think, are there any questions from the committee? No, there's quite a bit of confidence in the fire department and their chief, the series of chiefs. And what I like about this is, I'll just say, is that we're self-critical. And we're always correcting and trying to adjust and so on. Do we have a timeline on the movement? Because of the third crossing, there's going to be the movement. Used to be, I may have this wrong, maybe I misread the report. The movement of the fire station on Railway was going to go up to Elliott. Are we still with that plan, and how far away are we, if not? If so, or if not?
I believe it's my page 33 of the report.
Okay.
So one of the improvement plans was to adjust the station boundaries, which I commented on earlier, add an optimized fire station location in the West End urban area, which really affects about 44,000 population projected to 2026. So that will greatly improve response times in the not only the travel time, but the total response time performance of KFR and staff, and allowing them to travel safely. That's the third to the scene of an emergency. The rebuilding of the railway fire station, that's been on the books for quite some time. I believe we're getting close to finalizing some of the planning around that so that we can build that. And that was always an opportunity to have that positioned in such a way to not only respond better to the needs and replacing a very, very old station, but also assisting with that third crossing to see how that will actually work. Time will tell with that, and that's why we're suggesting we report back on that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I mean, because it was always projected that the third crossing would actually help out with calls of the northern central part of the city. And that's still being looked at, though.
Absolutely. We've done some, again, with our partners at the city, and this was all done with with KFR staff, which I have to commend for their work on this, and also GIS staff and planning staff. And it was a full-on team effort by city staff in this regard, without any need for a consultant. So that was excellent. And so we looked at the third crossing impact modeling with GIS, and we do see some potential improvements, but we're not sure we want to come right out and say that yet until we actually see the historical response data from apparatus responding over there. And also looking at as the growth plays out along the Highway 15 corridor, there's impacts to that. So we'll look at that, and but we really feel that the first priority is and the largest population that will help bring down our total response time performance would be improving the situation in the west side. And as I said, there's a lot of good news stories. The volunteers in the rural and the volunteers in the urban, when we're looking at effective response force, and the urban full-time firefighters with the effective response force, they do a great job in meeting that boundary. We're looking at the distribution of fire stations right now in this report and optimizing the travel times so that we can meet council's objectives that they've provided us within the bylaw.
Right, thank you very much. And seems to be well in hand. So seeing no questions from the committee, I believe, We need to put the recommendation on the floor. Do I have a mover? Councillor McLaren, seconded by Councillor Neil. Any comments? Seeing none. All those in favor? And that passes unanimously. Thank you,
Thank you,
Chief.
Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, councillors.
Okay, so now a little bit back and forth. This, I think, is a much more interesting, well, not more interesting, but contentious perhaps. Preliminary project scope, Kingston Memorial Center Community Hub Revitalization Project Phase 1. So staff, the heavy hitters back. Okay.
Okay.
You know,
So-
they only bring the commissioners in when there's something going on.
Thank you. Is that my introduction?
Yeah,
Mr. Chair?
no, here's Commissioner Hugenboss doing his quite well usually.
Right
So
on.
he's-
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Mr. Chair. This is an exciting project and report tonight. It is a very early step in a process about the Memorial Center. I have with me Lucretia Turner, the Director of Recreation and Leisure Services, who is available tonight for questions, as well as the Executive Officer, Chief Executive Officer of the YMCA here for the Eastern Region of Ontario, Rob Adams, because this is a very interesting opportunity we have, but early on with the M Center. So, councillors, you may recall that at the budget meetings, I did present a budget for my groups, including Rec and Leisure, and talked about some preliminary budget for the Memorial Center, a revitalization project, and that I would come back before spending that money to understand an endorsement of a scope of work for this project. So what we have here tonight is seeking your endorsement to undertake a very preliminary level of feasibility analysis for the site based on a preliminary scope. So this is in no way a final approval of the project, the scope, or the process or anything. It's just to get a good understanding of the site so that we can build toward future phases, future approvals from council, as well as full public engagement with all our great partners at the Memorial Center, the neighborhood, the public, user groups. It's obviously a very well used and great location, the Memorial Center. We know that partnerships in this type of work and redeveloping a recreational and community asset like this are key to being successful with upper levels of funding for grants. And council, you may recall that we did bring a report to council on this in 2019, looking for an endorsement of an application that was unsuccessful ultimately as part of a ISIP recreation stream fund. And at that time, we were saying we need to find good partners and to build a solid grant application. So one of the key parts of the scope of this project would be a potential partnership with the YMCA of Eastern Ontario. They are located in central Kingston near the Memorial Center at the Wright Crescent property. They have an aging aquatics and fitness facility there. And Rob's here, but the YMCA board is willing to pursue a partnership with the city to invest in the Memorial Center site, taking the proceeds of selling the Wright Crescent property and reinvesting those at the Memorial Center to open a brand new aquatics and wellness center on the property. So that has a great potential, not only because the city needs support to fund the development of the site, but also to build a good, strong application for grant funding, showing that we can partner with our community partners here in Kingston and really deliver a project that would serve the needs of the community. So that is that's a great potential partnership there. We're also looking at a few other options for the site that we want to investigate with the budget that has already been approved by council. So the outdoor aqua park is great, but it's a limited asset in that we only use it about 3 months of the year because it's an outdoor water facility in Eastern Ontario. So we want to investigate the opportunity of actually enclosing it to build on that asset to use it year round. Don't know if it's, well, anything's probably feasible, but don't know the costs or implications of doing that. But we want to start the investigation to do that, to maximize the value of that asset. We want to explore the possibility of expanding the ice pads from 1 to 2 on the property. That wouldn't be an increase in level of service citywide. We talked earlier about that would likely come at a reduction of an ice pad at Center 70 and repurposing that facility. It's great from a sport tourism perspective to start to cluster facilities together. So having 2 rinks in 1 building makes more sense from that perspective, to have them together, as well as partnering with the potential for aquatic facilities in a net zero energy application, which is one of the key principles that we'd be looking at this site as well, of reconstructing the assets into net zero energy. The community services hub portion is very exciting because we can take this great location, has great outdoor amenities, but really reframing the indoor space to serve the community with partners such as Loving Spoonful or the United Way, the Boys and Girls Club, and the great work they do with our youth, Queen's University, all these potential partners to deliver services. Right now, it's a 70-year-old facility that was built for junior A hockey with 3,000 seats that we don't really use at all throughout the year. So really good opportunity there. We do see a great potential for indoor and outdoor year-round farmers market. So the Memorial Center Farmers Market has been a great asset to Kingston, and in particular this community and the site, for the past about 10 years. So having the opportunity to go year-round indoor market is in line with the direction we've received from council recently over the last couple of years when we talk about how we want to structure our farmers markets. We want to celebrate the market downtown, but also foster healthy markets throughout the city. And one of the focus was to have a year-round indoor market. So this would be a great site because we know how popular and successful the Memorial Center Market has been. The site obviously has a long history of agricultural events as with the Kingston District Agricultural Society. We recognize that things may change or may need to change with the site as it gets revitalized. If we're successful down the road with funding through council, funding from upper levels of government, and partnership with the Y, in that there's real opportunity to incorporate an agricultural and local farming lens to the site throughout the year because of a potential for a farmer's market. Understanding that a farmer's market isn't a complete package of all the farming community here in Kingston, but there's opportunities to do that on a year-round basis, but also to reach out and work with the Agricultural Society to say there may be changes here. What are the opportunities on the site, but also what are the opportunities off the site that we can approach you? We have a great resource now. The city, as council knows, in approving a manager of rural economic and community development with that office and a rural economic strategy. Tracy Snow has been doing great work with the farming community here in Kingston. So we want to explore those opportunities with them. And last but not least, the opportunity to continue the legacy of the site as a memorial to those who died from Kingston serving in the Canadian Armed Forces. Very important, I think, to all of us. And that would be something that will continue to be celebrated and honored on this property for years to come. And that's, I just want to make sure you know that is one of the key opportunities here with the site. And all those types of things can be rolled into the future grant applications for upper levels of government funding. But bottom line tonight, what we're looking for is an endorsement in that preliminary scope. It is not a done deal by any stretch of the imagination, but that we want to go forward with investigating the geotechnical condition of the site, the condition of the building footprint and envelope, and understanding the soil quality and the size of the services so that we can understand, is this scope feasible? can we pursue it to the next stage of really getting into the details of due diligence so that council can make a decision and the community can make a decision, and that we can present what the site could or cannot be when we present that information back to the community and council. So that's where we're at. It is a very preliminary step, but we thought it's very important that the committee and council knows that those are the things that we're looking at. Whether they can all happen or not is time will tell, for sure. So again, Lucretia is here, Rob is here. I know it's starting to get a long night, but we're happy to answer any questions here from the committee. Thank you.
So,
and I'm sorry, I think maybe, yeah, I'm sorry. I see the Christian Rob. I should be more aware. They might just want to add a couple things.
well, I was going to ask that, and
I'm sorry.
But so go ahead, Mr. Adams, and then Lucretia Turner. Go ahead.
Thank you, Committee Chair. Really, I'm just really here in support of Lucretia and Peter today. As council knows, we've already established a very positive relationship with city staff and running and partnering with the Kingston East Community Center. So we've established that in March, and that's going really, really well. And we created a reciprocal agreement where Y users can access city facilities and city users can access Y facilities. And, you know, we're using Dorito Heights to deliver free programming to that neighborhood that we recognize as an association that even getting access to our own building was a challenge for that area. So we wanted to go to that area specifically to reduce that barrier. And so this partnership moving forward, there's lots of examples of municipalities and YMCAs partnering on joint builds and joint ventures like this. So this concept isn't unique per se across the country. It's happening everywhere. And because our relationship has grown to be so positive, that we figured that from a board perspective and a donor perspective and a stakeholder perspective, there's support on the Y's end to start investigating what a joint venture like this would be for the Kingston area. And we do have an aging building at Wright Crescent. It's a 70-year-old building. And with the amount of money that we would need to necessarily put into that building, it would be better served investing in a new building with a new partner. But happy to answer any other questions that you may have or other council members might have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Turner, this will be thick into your portfolio if this happens. So perhaps you have an opinion you'd like, or perspective you'd like to lend to this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee members. So I just echo Peter's comments. So here tonight, with this report, very exciting opportunity here. This obviously lines up with a lot of recommendations within the Parks and Recreation Master Plan, and then as Rob has stated, the City of Kingston has had a very successful partnership with the YMCA of Eastern Ontario now for several years, but most recently in the last 3 or 4 years at the Dorito Heights Community Center and at the Kingston East Community Center, but also at Artillery Park as well during COVID, when the Artillery Park Aquatic Center was being used temporarily in the beginning for the integrated care hub. So YMCA very graciously opened up their doors to our City of Kingston recreation fitness members so that we could continue to offer programming there. So we thank them for that, but definitely happy to be here tonight because as Peter stated, we did mention this in our budget presentation. So happy to be here tonight with this report and happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks very much. So I will move now to the committee. Any preliminary questions? Councillor Neal. I know he's retiring, but that's ridiculous.
Thank you very much. A couple of questions. First, I want to thank Mr. Hugenboss, who shared with both the Williamsville Community Association and myself a lot of information and already answered a lot of questions that came forward. I did receive an email from a constituent who's very active in the community And they asked about some of the same questions I would have asked anyway, including about the fall fair. Now, there's a lot, those barns, most of them are unused for most of the year. Is it possible that we may be able to either repurpose those under this plan, or in fact, remove them to expand the park in future? Are those possibilities that would be considered?
Thank you, Councillor Neal, and through you, Mr. Chair. So everything's on the table at this point, but I would expect that with the scale of the potential uses for this property to serve the community, that those barns are going to prove to be in difficult and rough shape in order to preserve for the scale of the opportunity for this property and the needs of the community. That when we go into public engagement, we don't know what we're going to hear, but I would suspect we're going to hear a lot of things that the site could become to serve the community, which is what was heard, a few years back with the engagement on what could happen at the Memorial Center. So that's where you can see there could be an evolution of what the property will become. The barns would likely not be part of that evolution in that, but you could have year-round indoor farmers markets in their place. But again, jumping to conclusions, because we really have to understand the site better to know what could possibly go where and what's suitable to host things.
Well, you always have to begin with dreams to make the interesting things happen. So I appreciate that. I also received from a constituent the statement that I have no problems with the city partnering with nonprofits like the YMCA for aquatic services. I agree with that. I think it's potentially a really good idea. I know that there are, in the GTA, for instance, there are school boards and municipalities that have partnered, so there are pools on school sites, and they're operated by the school during the day and by the municipality at night or after school hours. Is there going to be any kind of reciprocal agreement so that children or families that don't have deep pockets perhaps can't afford to join the Y, even as modest as as modest as what you charge, that they would still have access to the pool during those times?
Yeah, so I'll get started, and I think Mr. Adams will hop in, Mr. Chair, if I could. So through you, Councillor Hutchison. So a couple things. A nonprofit partner like the Y and our other partners that we have in our community centers are very welcome to deliver services, I think, based on past practice and the partnerships we've built, like the Boys and Girls Club is doing great things for us with local youth, as well as operating a pool in the West End as well. So they're fantastic, as well as the United Way programming, and the Seniors Association and many other nonprofit partners. We also have many nonprofit partners at the site right now that we can't wait to work with to see how they could continue to be involved at the M Center. Yellow Bike Action. I don't want to start listing them because I'm going to forget too many, but I just know that we have some great partners there. From an aquatics perspective, we know the Y is a proven entity across Canada that can run these facilities and provide school programming. We of course look forward to working with the school boards. Unless things have changed, I understand they don't typically have the money to invest in capital infrastructure of this nature, but definitely I think I'll turn it over to Rob, because I know there are lots of school programs. I know personally with my kids that go through their school into Y facilities during the day in order to get swim lessons and or swim tests. So Rob, if you wanted to maybe jump in, that'd be great.
Sure. Thanks, Peter, and through you, Committee Chair Hutchinson. So a couple things I'll address. One, I'll talk about our fee structure a little bit from the Y perspective, as Councillor Neer spoke about access to our programs and services. And the unique thing about the YMCA, one, is that we support basically ages from cradle to grave. And so we cover a wide range of ages because we want to develop centers for the community and be a community connector. From a fee standpoint, yes, we have a revenue stream in terms of fee for service and membership fees, but all of those are able to be accessed for those who can't afford our full fee rate. So the charitable side of the Y is that we provide subsidy to those who can't afford it. That's the charitable side of the Y. So even if an individual can't afford it, you still can gain access to our programs and services. So we have individuals who receive subsidy up to 95%. We just ask some families maybe to put a little bit towards their membership. And so the level of subsidy can range from 10% subsidized to 95 to almost 100. So because we believe everybody has a right to access programs and services to stay healthy and well. From a school board perspective and a partnership standpoint, currently our YMCA has about 46 various partnerships and so we consider ourselves a partner and a collaborator. Specifically with the school board, we run programs with school boards called Swim to Survive, where it's free swimming lessons during the school day. So schools will come to the Y and get taught an actual swimming lesson over a period of 6 to 8 weeks. So we do have those connections. We have connections with St. Lawrence College about international students coming to Canada. We're surrounded by water. And so we feel aquatic safety is a necessary life skill. So we want to make sure we provide that opportunity. So hopefully that adds some clarity to Councillor Neal's inquiries about partnerships and fees.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And just a quick aside to Lucretia, if I might. It's my understanding that the city has a similar assistance program that residents or families could benefit from. If you could just quickly outline that, that'd be great.
Sure. For you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Councillor Neal, for that question. So the City of Kingston does have we do have a fund as well. It's called Spark. So people are eligible through the Housing and Social Services. So they go through Housing and Social Services. The criteria is met down there. They can receive Spark funding. They can receive a free transit pass. They can receive many different things through the municipal fee assistance program. So when they come to Recreation and Leisure Services, they're allocated a certain amount of money per family. And or per individuals in the family, which then allows them to register for City of Kingston programs and services.
Great. Thank you very much. I also received from the same constituent a question regarding Queens. I know right now Queens with their hockey programs and with their skating programs use the Memorial Center, but also the Invista Center. Have we been able to speak to Queens and recognize that they will have a continue that relationship? Because I don't think they're ever going to replace Jock Hardy Arena, just as the Y would rather not have to replace have the capital costs of a new pool. Is that something that you anticipate, Mr. Hergenboss?
Definitely, Councillor Neal. I share your skepticism on whether they would build a new one, and I don't have an opinion either way, but I don't know, and I think that we would welcome them to continue to be a tenant, if you will, a very large user group in our facility. The Church Athletic League is a great user group in our facility as well as many other ice-related entities, but those are the two main ones, and it's a great opportunity for Queens to be involved. They're very interested back in 2019, and we believe they'll continue to be interested in this facility. It's a great location for them, as it is for many residents in
Right.
Kingston.
And I have 2 toddler grandkids who love going to Memorial Center because of the splash pad and because of the great park, children's park area there. I want to applaud the city for doing such a good job there. Do we anticipate a potential for expanding that splash pad? I know it's a large splash pad as it is, but
Yeah.
will that be a consideration?
Thank you, Councillor Neil. So yeah, it's always a consideration based on the public engagement and feedback. It is one of our largest, if not our largest splash. So maybe Lake Ontario Park would be bigger, but it's very well used, popular. It's great. So we want to maximize the value and the investments that we've already made as a city and a community. So that's fantastic. But there's always opportunity through the engagement to see what the needs are for the community.
Great. And I know that you were CC'd on some concerns from constituents regarding landscaping and tree planting and replacing dead trees that are on site. I know that you responded that you could look into that immediately. We don't have to go through a phase 1 for
That's
those
correct.
kinds of things. Yeah. So I appreciate that. I also have tried in the past to recommend trees within the dog park area. And it's always been a little bit of pushback in past years from the the fall fair people, because they don't want, they would rather have a green field too. And Napanee, I know, hosts the same fair on a well-treed park. So even if they were to continue, I think some appropriate planting of trees for the dozens and dozens of people that take their dogs to that park every day would be appreciated. Is that something that you could consider without a phase 1?
Yeah, no, definitely. We can consider, excuse me, I will, I'll talk to Commissioner Joyce and the team to see what the consideration is there, and look to what we have to do. You know, we do have dog park users, but we also have other users of the site. So that might take a little longer to look into, but not the same as like a whole phase 1 in this whole project. But we'll have to get a little more familiar with the background personally. But absolutely, Councillor Neil, we can address that and take a look at it.
Great, I appreciate that. This is a really exciting project. And
Sure.
I won't be on council when it gets finished, but I'm sure I'll use the park even more. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the committee? No, I've got a couple, probably because it's a few blocks from my house. When you conceive of the aquatic center under YMCA management, where would be the location? I know the barns have probably got to go, and we'll have to deal with that as it comes up. But where would it be, where the parking lot is now? And then what are you going to do about parking on that? I mean, do you have any preliminary concepts about how that would work? I'm talking to directly to you, Mr. Ugumas, and Mr. Adams.
No, for sure, Councillor Hutchland. So no, we're not there yet. We're almost in the pre-concept stage of just what would we like to see, or what would the community need, and what are the opportunities for the property. It's not about after this work, then that type of architectural site work can take shape, because it might have to do with where is the location for the best services that can come into the site that can help locate these types of uses. We already have an aquatic facility there, so it would seem natural to partner a brand new indoor aquatic facility in partnership with that system. But there's also a net zero component here to look at how do you share the energy between these two different facilities that will cut down on energy uses between cold ice pad and a warm pool. So there's all these things that take into consideration, as well as geotechnical and soil. So no, there is no preconceived notion of where things can go. We just know there's some really good buckets of items from aquatics and ice pad and community use and in farmers market to consider. So that's where we're at this stage. It's too early to say where things could go.
Okay. These are just sort of questions the public is going to ask, right?
No doubt.
It's going to filter down to us eventually.
For sure.
So-
And if I may, that's why we need to do this work now, so that we're in a better position to actually answer those questions. Because I don't want to say, oh, it'd be great to put it right there, and then find out that the soil or the ground could never support that type of use. That's what we need to know.
Right. I mean, I've got a couple other questions, but it strikes me that there may be people from the public, and we're coming back to the committee anyway. So, Mr. Clerk, if it's okay with you, I think perhaps we'll go to the public now, and we're going to come back to the committee. So, and I believe there may be people who want to ask questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair, there are two people in the viewing gallery, and I recognize Joanne Bowie has her hand up.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Bowie.
Thank you very much, Chairman and committee. I have written to Councillor Neal, and he has covered some of my questions. First of all, this is just a general comment to the Parks Department, that I'm delighted with how well looked after the parks are. Despite the comments about the Memorial Centre, I walk frequently at Lake Ontario Park, and I live near Victoria Park, and I commend you on hiring these students who own the park and really look after them very well. So I would just like to say that whatever that project is that you have where you assign students to the parks, it's working really well from my point of view. They have ownership. So I have a couple of concerns if you go with the why, which I have no problem with, but you're going to lose a pool. And we've also lost a pool at Beach Grove. So my concern is, unless you build another pool, we're having sort of losses of pools. To me, I know it's expensive, but it would be more ideal if there were more smaller pools throughout the community, because my experience with the Memorial Centre pool, which we frequented a lot when our daughter was young, is that was fine for us, and we could afford to buy a pass and afford to go regularly. But people who have less income, and I understand this is maybe changed, would maybe just be able to buy one-day pass because they couldn't afford the month pass. So if you put a pool in the North End where there are children who maybe don't have some of the opportunities to learn to swim, or the parents don't understand the safety issues about the need to know how to swim, I mean, I don't know how you do this, because running just a pool, I don't know how you do it, but I wouldn't put it at the Invista Center because everybody has to go there by car. So the other comments I have are, Bruce Downey years ago worked on a project looking at some potential building use at the Memorial Centre. And if you notice, one of the barns is called the Downey Barn. It might be worth recontacting him for some of his vision about how the land could be used. And I believe he was instrumental in the linear park that goes around along on Concession Street. So he's a good resource for that, in my opinion. The other thing is, I know the issue about the barns, but I don't know if any of you have ever been to the Witchwood Barns Market in Toronto, where they've repurposed some other building and build a really interesting market. Open at both ends where people can, the produce can come in And they've reused old buildings is what I'm saying. So, before you dismiss the barns completely, there are some ways that some of those things can be reutilized from what I've seen in the past. Anyway, I thank you very much for your time, and good luck with this project. The people in Williamsville will be watching it. Oh, one final thing. I wouldn't bet my money on Queens. They changed their mind. There's a new board of directors. They build a residence. They're not going to build a residence. They buy the land on Union Street. They sell the land on Union Street. They buy St. Mary's. Who knows what they'll do. I wouldn't bet my money on Queens and no Marina. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak from the public?
There is one other member of the public in the viewing gallery. We'll just give them a moment. Just once again, if you would like to speak in Zoom, the little hand is at the center of your screen at the bottom.
Okay, we'll just wait a minute here.
And I'm not seeing any additional hands, Mr. Chair.
Okay, fair enough. We're back to the committee, and apparently we're back to Mr. Huguemots as well. Okay.
Sorry to disappoint, Chair. I thought I'd touch on some of those comments from Joan. I don't know if it's Miss Bowie or Bowie, but Joan, wonderful comments, and appreciate the emails earlier. I would like to first clarify that it is the Public Works Department that does do the landscaping, maintenance, and all the great work around the property at the Memorial Center. So I think Commissioner Joyce is still on the call. He's happy to take that compliment. I think we as a team take that compliment, but that's wonderful to hear from Joan, and I agree. It's a beautiful place to spend time. There's a mention that there'd be a reduction in pools. So what we're proposing here with this conceptual level is no reduction in the community, in that Rob and his team at the YMCA would build a new aquatic facility, probably larger than what they have at Wright Crescent, but at least replacing what they have at Wright Crescent here at the Memorial Center, in addition to the current outdoor aquatic facility that we already have, the recently named Culligan Water Park. And there's an opportunity that the city could enclose the outdoor aqua park as well. So we're looking at that would actually bring a higher level of service of aquatics to the city in the central region. And duly noted on Joan's comments about the Invista Center. Of course, the committee saw the report earlier tonight on a new pool would cost in the neighborhood of $55 million estimated for that site. I would note that a council did approve a partnership with Loyalist Township, should they be successful with rebuilding their pool, that the city of Kingston would contribute, because many West End residents go to Loyalist Township, and there is Kingston Transit service to Loyalist Township pool. So those are some future opportunities that may come down to keep up with the demand for aquatics. But it is exciting. And I agree, the M Center site is a walkable central location. It is fantastic from that perspective. We're very lucky as a community to have that asset and to be able to have the potential to revitalize it with the community services that we may be able to provide there through this project. Great advice and input on the barn names and Bruce Downey as a resource. We thank Joan for that. I'm not familiar with that market in Toronto, but I am familiar with other markets in Toronto, such as in recreation areas like the Toronto Brickworks, that has readapted an old industrial area into a market type venue and recreational space. So happy to look at that, and that's a little longer term than what we're talking about tonight for what potentially could become of the barns or any part of the site. So that's great, and duly noted on the Queen's comment. And again, we are happy to work with any partners, but we know as a lead partner, the Y is very interested in bringing substantial resources to the project, as well as their expertise in running an aquatic facility. So,
very good. Any other comments from the committee? I've got a couple, and a couple of questions, I think.
Oh, and so I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Mr. Adams may have wanted to respond.
Oh yeah, sure. Go right ahead. Sorry, I didn't see the hand.
My apologies.
Go ahead. No problem.
Thank you, and Peter, through you, Committee Chair Hutchinson. I just want to make sure, because this is very conceptual and very early stages about this partnership, with the public being able to access this and to be fully aware, there could be questions from a wide community perspective that we're really focusing on the aquatics piece right now. But what the Y is interested in and the city is interested in is we do more things than just aquatics within our building. And so what we're looking at is an aquatics wellness facility. So the other programs and services, like if you take what Kingston East does and what the Y does, we're looking at a full service YMCA, similar to what White Crescent is. So it's not just focused on aquatics, although we're known nationally as experts in aquatics. So just wanted to make sure we clarify that for the public.
Well, good, thank you. I'm just going to pick up where I left off, if you don't mind. So I guess in general, with these developments or redevelopments, you're fine when you're adding services, right? The problem arises when you start subtracting services. And of course, we had a long, protracted, I'll call it a community discussion, but it was considerably more fraught than that, you know, just 10, 12, 14 years ago, about the things that Councillor Neil and the public have mentioned, and like the splash pad and the children's area, but also the linear park. I mean, I remember how much money we spent on those things, and it was not cheap. Okay, and so my concern is about, I will mention about maintaining the park. Councillor Neil's issue about the trees in the dog park area, which I can see the attraction of that. There's the problem with the fall fair and its connection to the Agricultural Society. And we're not getting out of that contract anytime soon without protracted negotiations or offers or whatever. I've read it in concert with the city's legal solicitor. So no one should make any assumptions there, okay? So, and also the current tenants, as you say, and I think the Y would be open to that. I hope they'd be open to that, that there's Loving Spoonful. And these are very popular community-based organizations. And so if you want a community feel to this and not an institutional one, you'll accommodate those tenants in some fashion. So, Mr. Adams, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, Committee Chair. I just wanted to reiterate what I said earlier, that currently the YMCA of Eastern Ontario has 46 different partnerships in place with other organizations. So we're not looking to be a sole entity. We're stronger together when we work as partners and collaborators. And I think that sometimes there just needs to be a lead partner kind of helping facilitate that along with the city. So we're used to partnerships and collaborations. We're not looking to be alone in this.
I appreciate that. And I read it in the report actually, but I thought it should be emphasized for the purposes of this meeting. So any other comments? So I'm back at the committee. We are back at the committee, and there's a recommendation, because if we want to see anything happen, we need to pass that recommendation. So does anyone wish, Councillor McLaren's willing to move that? Is there a seconder? Councillor Neil? Councillor Bohm is sort of there. And so any discussion? Not seeing any. All those, the clerk is going to vote. Yes.
No, sorry, Mr. Chair. It's just us.
Just teasing.
Currently see, we can't currently see Mr. Councillor Bohm.
I know. I can't see him either.
So we can't actually vote because technically we're kind of out of quorum right now.
Oh, can we send him a text?
I will send him an email immediately. We have 5 minutes before goes,
Okay.
but we need to make sure he's back for this vote.
Okay, no problem. So we're just gonna wait, I guess. I'm hoping I've got him on my, I don't. Does anybody have, can anyone text him? Okay, good. Thanks, Peter. Councillor Neil. Oh, you're muted.
Sorry about that. I had something I was going to bring up in other business for the clerk, but perhaps I can do that now. This is the only committee I'm aware of that doesn't have a vice chair. Could we put that on the agenda as the first item for our next meeting?
The vice chair is currently Councillor Rosanek.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yes.
It doesn't show up on the minutes and that. So
no, we don't normally display the vice chair on the minutes of the meeting unless they are actively chairing the meeting at some point.
Oh, okay. That's fine.
Apparently the clerks have their procedures and they're going to defend them to the death. Okay, there's Councillor Bohm. Sorry to bother you. Yeah, but
My apologies. I had a kid catastrophe happening.
yeah, well, I think we all know what that's all about. The quite understandable. So we've just got the recommendation on the floor. I believe it's being moved and seconded. We don't have to do that again because of lack of quorum, I presume. But we need you to have quorum, so your vote is even more important than usual. So all those in favor of the recommendation, please vote. It's unanimous. So we're off to a great start. So that's the end of that item. And half a second here while I get trouble with multiple screens. There's a recommendation, which is basically to endorse a preliminary project scope for the Kingston Memorial Center Community Hub Revitalization Scope and execute the commissioner, meaning Mr. Hugomas, executing agreements necessary to do that. So we just passed that. Number 8 is motions. There are none. No notices of motion. Half a sec here. No other business. There was no correspondence, lots of emails, but it sounds like. And the date of next meeting is Thursday, August 3rd, 2022 at 6 p.m. And now we have adjournment. Councillor McLaren will move that. Who will second it? Councillor Bohm. They both look a little relieved. They all those in favor of adjournment, vote oh, we're on site here. Okay, thanks, folks. Thanks to the staff. Thanks for the clerk. It was really well done. And thanks to other staff that were present. And so good night.